Hello and welcome to another edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. I'm Rebecca. I'm the owner of Sun Dragon Art and Fiber in downtown Brevard, North Carolina. Monday, I'm at my house, and in July we are starting the Montana bag Crochet-a-long. And I've worked with the pattern writer to get you a discount on the pattern the whole month of July. It is 15% off with the code SUNDRAGON. We have coordinated on I'm only going to make a couple of videos that have to do with the beginning and the end that are techniques that you can find in many different patterns. The stitch that's in the middle, she has some good instructions and some great photos. I mean, all of it's great. So use those, and if you have difficulty with that, reach out to me. We can set up a lesson, but I will not be making videos on that since it's the majority of the bag. So what I'm going to do today is crocheting into both sides of a chain. Many bags and things like this will start off with just a little beginning chain and say go down one side and back up the other to create a base that is going to be then the circular base for the bag. I've got my bag right here, one that I finished. Here's one of my basically finished Montana bags. And we're going to talk about how to do this. The color changing yarn on this one is great because that line of kind of a red there in the very bottom is the very beginning of this bag. That was my crochet chain that I then worked into both sides of, and then I could start going in a circle for the rest of the bag. My tip for doing this is to break the beginning chain down into two sections. There's 3 strands involved in a chain, and it can be a little hard to recognize what's going on. I'm going to try to help you recognize that and give you some tips to be able to do that. This can be used for many different beginnings of bags and other things where you need a long piece that you are going around in a circle. So let's get to it. First, let's just look at a little bit of this in terms of pictures and then show you on actual yarn. So scrub ahead to the right spot if the pictures you don't find helpful. But I find for a lot of people this can be very helpful. So crocheting into both sides of the chain. And as I mentioned in introduction, used for the bottom of bags, sometimes for crochet animals, amigurumi, that kind of thing. There could be a longer piece that needs to start. The biggest thing for me is to think about a chain as having 2 components. There is the front, which I often call a V. It looks like a V. In the middle of all the craziness, you'll see 2 strands that are coming together, kind of like a V-neck. Let's make that orange. So 2 strands that make up the front of the stitch. And if you flip the whole chain over, if it hasn't twisted, you have a back to it that I call a bump. This is actually what I really like to work into the first time I'm working a chain. When I teach crochet, I don't necessarily talk about this back bump because it can be harder to recognize. It really depends on who I'm teaching, what direction we take, and sometimes we look at various different things to see if we can get that. But if you flip it over, you'll see those front V strands on the edges, but you'll see what looks like a line of bumps running straight down the back. If we separate these out into 2 components, it makes it easier to go down one side and up. So to make the row easier to do this, if we have a straight chain that's not twisted, I go down the bumps and first and then back up the V's. So all the way down the bumps, and then that gives me a clear path to go back up. So the first thing I advise doing is flip it, hold it so it's parallel to the ground so you can see those back bumps. So you might hold it so you can see the V's and then flip it. We'll do that in a few minutes with the actual yarn. This, I'm holding it parallel. Here's my hook over here. And we decided to make those back bumps when you're looking at them when it's parallel to the ground. Here are the back bumps. They will look like a row of humps kind of running down your chain. The way I've drawn it, if you hold it at the right angle, these are the V's that can constitute the front of that chain as you were making it. When you hold it at the right angle to see those humps on the back, you don't see both strands of the V's. You might only see one with the humps rising above it. So the first thing we want to do is do a stitch into every single one of those humps. It's just pushing your hook, starting right here, going front to back under each one to make your stitch. In this case, my pictures, we're doing a single crochet. When you do a stitch into each hump, here's what it will look like. A single crochet, you've got a little bit of a hidden V facing you, and you've got a ridge of V's across the top. So in the picture we're looking at here, those bottom V's from the original chain are underneath your stitches. The humps we went through, you may not even be able to see them, but they're there. The humps we went through are buried under the stitches at this point. So let's make these single crochets a different color so we can identify them as we keep moving. I'm going to make both the top and the front of these stitches. Single crochets are thicker than that beginning chain. I'm going to make all parts of this single crochet that we just did green. I added a little caveat here that sometimes to turn the corner, because we want to start working across the other side, sometimes the directions will say at least 3 stitches into that last stitch to turn the corner. That rotates you around, but we're going to rotate this whole thing. When we get to this spot, we're going to rotate the whole work to head back across the next section. But this time to head back, instead of going under that hump or bump, we're going to go under each V. So I've taken the piece up here and I've turned it. So let's color code this so that we can see those green V's I just made are now on the bottom because I've rotated this. And maybe even these 3 that turned the corner. What we see facing us right now is actually that beginning, the front part of that beginning chain, those orange stitches from up above. We can now see fully. The ones up here that we didn't work because we worked the blue part of it are now right in front of us to work. Those blue humps are still buried under there somewhere, but they're no longer accessible. What's accessible are those front V's. So now we're going to take our hook and go under both strands. We're going to come under both strands right here and work our way back down the other side. When you finish all of that, it's going to look like there are stitches emerging from an imaginary line almost. That beginning chain is going to be completely sucked up into all the stitches. So it'll look something like this. Think about this as like an excerpt, a little section of what we've done. And on the bottom here, we'll have that first row of stitches that we made. And on top, we'll have the second row of stitches that we made by going under the entire V. And you won't even see that beginning chain. Anything that we had labeled purple or blue in the original piece won't even be visible. It'll just look like 2 rows of stitches emerging from the same spot. So this is my beginning chain for the second bag that I'm making. I've already finished one. And again, if we look at it, The front of the chain has a bunch of V's, and the back of the chain has single bumps running down it. I'm going to make about 5 more. Here, the V's are in the front. If I make 5 more chains, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, the front looks like a V. The legs of it might be a little bit jig-jogged, but we've got a V there. And the back of it looks like a bunch of bumps just running straight down. Often when I teach, when I teach people intro crochet, I'll talk about these V's. They're much more visible. And we'll talk about going into the middle or the bottom of each V. I actually like to work down these humps because I find them, once you're used to it, they are easier to see. And holding it like the picture, the humps running down the back, the V's in the front, the humps can be easier to see running parallel. We don't have to worry about if the sides of the V kind of are mismatched and which one's which. So going down the back end of this, different instructions will tell you different things. Often we'll be skipping maybe like the first hump there, right there with my thumb, and going into the second one, and we're just going to push under that one strand to leave the other two for when we work back up. I'm going to be doing singles. And depending on your instructions, the instructions for this bag have more than one into the first stitch. But working my way down, this big open space is the one I just did. So here's the next one I want to go into. Remember, we don't want to hit any of those V's. We're leaving them for the way back. So I'm going to do my best. You can always fudge this. I'm working with a cotton. There's not a lot of give here. I'm going to keep looking for each bump on the back. These bumps will touch each other. So if this one that's pulled really big is here, it's the next one. They almost touch each other. With one customer, I call them kissing cousins right there. Here's the next one. I'm going to work my way all the way down these back bumps. This one that's big is a hole that I've already worked into. So I'm going to go to the next one. Big hole because there's a stitch there. Gonna look for the next one. Sometimes, especially if you have a metal hook, it can be really helpful to have your finger back behind here so you have something to push against to get your next stitch in. Big guy. If you take a look at what I'm making, it looks a little bit like that picture where we've got the V's at the bottom, this bottom chain, we're working into the back bumps, and we're keeping it from this chain from twisting. So I'm just going to work across this whole thing and meet you at the other end to show you how to go back along the other side. Okay, I'm almost at the end. I'm still trying to go into these back bumps. One way to think about it is the back bump is anything that's not the front V, if that helps. So I don't want to be messing with this front V. It's going to leave a whole nice line of stitches to work back into. I'm just hitting this back bump. One back hump. As I go down here, some more slack. I have 2 more left that I can see. 1, and I said before to turn the corner. Here we have 1. I'm going to go into that same hole. 2. That makes a hump. If you did it anywhere along here, 2 stitches into the same hole would leave a hump. Now we're actually trying to do that hump. If we stick a 3rd one in that same hole where I'm down at my beginning tail, it starts to turn a corner. So I've just finished coming along here. I'm going to rotate the whole thing. We're going to take this and we're going to rotate it 180 degrees. So the stitches I just made are on the bottom. And what's on top right now are those front V's that we ignored this whole time, that we weren't going in. If you don't rotate it, if you just flip it, like usually in crochet, we flip things like a book and start working back across the top. It won't quite work. You'll have something else. We really want to take this and we want to rotate it. So we're looking at the bottom of the chain. Your tail will be right in front of you if you're doing this correctly. And I'm gonna take it to the back, just kind of tuck it back there and look for the first V right here. I'm going to stick my crochet hook under. This time I'm going under 2 strands. The whole way down I was only going under that back bump that was 1 strand, but now I'm going to do 2 strands. I'm going to pull up a loop and finish my single crochet. I've got a row of stitches here. I'm starting to build a row on top of it. I'm going to find my next, this thicker guy goes right here. I'm going to find my next spot to go into. And I'm going to go under the entire front V. Be careful, if you only catch 1 strand on this, it might pull and look loose and you'll have a ridge running down the back. We don't want that. We want to go under the entire V, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through both to do our single. Here's the stitch I just made. Here's the next spot. Dig down. I don't mean dig down by go straight down. I mean start here and then you might need to angle back just a hair to get under that V that is the front of your chain. If we look at it right here, here's my next one. When in doubt, when you're looking down and you're like, wait, there's a little thing here, make sure it's not where your last stitch went. Go forward. If anything, go more forward than you think you need to. It doesn't need to be perfect. It'll look nice and lined up if it's working right. Doesn't need to be perfect though. We can always fudge it. This is the bottom of your bag. If you're making this bag with us, it's the bottom of your bag. So hardly anyone is going to see it. Again, you can see where it's thicker, where I've done both sides, and where it's thinner, I've only done one side. Here's the top. I'm going to look at it to see where that V is, and I'm going to go under. Might need to wiggle a little under that whole V, but we're trying not to have too much motion going on because we can catch weird strands of things. And you're going to work your way all the way up the other side. Find the next spot we want to go in, push, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through both. Push, grab that yarn, pull it up, yarn over and go through both. And sometimes if it's tight, you got to wiggle it back through, especially with cotton. I'll meet you up at the other end. Oop, only caught one there. Got to catch 2, go under the whole V. If you need to, look at it, find the rest of your V. There we go. I'm reaching the end of going up the other side of this. And one of the benefits of going, it's a little tight to stick 2 rows of stitches into your beginning chain. One of the benefits of going down the back bumps that first pass means heading back up, it's tighter than normal, but it can feel like working all the other rows of single crochet after going into that beginning chain. Usually you're directed to go under a whole V. So this can more resemble a regular single or whatever stitch they're telling you to do in here. A regular row of stitches to go under the front V on the way back. That's another reason I go into the back bumps. I also, when going into a chain, tend to work the back bumps. I find it's more consistent and gives you a nicer edge. Not always the way I teach intro crochet, because they can be a little harder to spot if you're not used to it. Although I will say, when you're just starting out, everything looks crazy and new and different. I'm coming up to the end here. And sometimes I really have to work it hard. This looks like it's about the end. I did 2 stitches into this first one. I'm going to do 1 in there to have a matching 3 to the other end. And I'm going to slip stitch to join it together. Well, I'm going to try that again because I didn't cleanly go under the top V here. A slip stitch is just yarning over, pulling through everything. So I have, may not be perfect, maybe a little kinked right in there. I'm not going to be concerned about that because once I do more, that should even out. I might have missed a stitch in there, and if I did, yeah, you know what? I did. The reason this looks a little kinked is I think I missed a stitch there. That is one of those instances of your I don't care bar. Is it upsetting you that you missed one back there? Then go back and fix it. If not, just push forward. It's really easy to fudge stuff in crochet. Thanks for joining me for how to work both sides of a beginning chain. I even have an error in here, but I might just let it go. With the Montana bag, it's very important to have an even number of stitches, but that can be fudged if you get to the end of the next row, which again, I'm not going to do a video on, but if you follow the instructions and find it doesn't work out perfectly, you can fudge it and keep going. It will work. So thank you for watching. I hope this helps. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel, giving it a thumbs up, asking a question. If I can, I will answer it. All that helps the algorithms of YouTube help us find more people to watch these very fun videos. I have memberships here if you'd like to support the channel monetarily. I also have patreon.com/sundragon. We appreciate everybody in any way they can support, whether there's money involved or not. We really appreciate you supporting this channel. And as I always like to say, may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Okay, I just have to document. You just tried to walk on my whiteboard, right? Yeah. I know you want attention, but I gotta do this, all right? Yeah.